Hey all, I'm Andrew from Stasis Booth Games. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. Things are going to be a little bit different this week. I'm getting rid of the intro sequence, which is the Stasis Booth Games logo, and also things will get a little bit more technical. So let's jump right to it. First of all, if you're unaware, I'm developing a game called We Are Not Alone, which is now available in a wishlist on Steam and Epic. We Are Not Alone is a first-person and third-person horror adventure experience, where sometimes you need to place the camera down in order to solve puzzles, but that leaves you vulnerable. If this sounds cool to you, click the links in the description. You can also sign up for their mailing list, and you'll be notified as soon as the demo is available. So what happened this week? As I said in the last devlog, this was all about doing the new UI. Integrating the UI, getting graphics options and controller options in, and boy was it a pain in the ass. So let's talk about the new UI design. The first thing I needed to do was design the UI before I could implement it, which makes sense. And if you're following along on Twitter, I kind of posted some in-progress screenshots of how things were going, and I did get there in the end. The first idea I had was just to have like this black overlay with some text in there. And while it kind of looked cool and I could have iterated on that more, when I showed it to someone, they said to me, "What are you trying to convey with this?" My response was, "Something not shit," which is how the current UI was inside the game, which you can see here. Just basically a black box with some text in. Not very nice at all. But after they'd said that to me, my mind started just ticking over and I started thinking, wouldn't it be cool to have something that seems kind of in-universe, something that actually relates to the game and the whole test subject scenario. That's when I came up with the Osiris Inductee manual, as you can see on screen now. It definitely feels a lot better to me and to others who have been testing this game for me. The cool thing about this UI too is that these are the tutorial screens I've shown you, and depending on whether it's detecting that you're using keyboard, mouse, or a controller, it will just change which UI it's displaying, so I don't need to try put all controller stuff into one page. With the UI done for the tutorials, it was time to move on to the options menu. Now the options menu was frustrating, annoying, and made me want to tear my hair out. The design wasn't the issue. A few panels here, a few panels there, some checkboxes, some drop downs. That's all well and good. Let's break it down into the two things that caused me severe headaches. The controller UI. So the controller UI again was very simple. Just get everything in there. Designing UI in Unity is fairly easy. At the start, I had many more options than what you see on screen for all kinds of weird inversions relating to the mouse and the controller. The code is mostly still there, so if someone requests it, I can add it, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what those options were because I don't want you to request it as a joke. Stepping aside from the controller UI for a second, I had this major issue with the controller, and it was just sometimes not getting the right input type. You'd be using the controller and it would just flick back to keyboard and mouse and just completely break things. So my implementation for this originally worked, but as the project got bigger, which we'll touch on a little bit later, as the project got bigger, it started breaking when certain things were switching on and off. The issue here is that I was trying to call a specific object in each scene. So when the scene would load, it would detect what controller type, and then it would switch on the fly if need be. The problem is that sometimes it would lose a reference to that object and just couldn't switch, or it would just switch something entirely wrong. Instead, what I've done, and it is definitely not the smartest idea because it might impact performance at some point, but for now, it works, and I need it to work for the demo. But what I'm doing now is I'm just continuously polling, checking what has been pressed. So if any button is pressed, any mouse movement is detected, any controller stick movement is detected, it goes, hey, okay, I've detected this, switch to this control type. It works. Terrible implementation, but at least it's not going to break. I just wanted to quickly discuss that controller stuff, but back to the options menu now. So the options menu is interesting because controllers suck for implementation. Not all the time, okay? It's specific to what I'm trying to do in this game. So this would have been so much easier if I was doing a pure first person or a pure third person game. It would have been super simple. The problem is that I've got two different control schemes that need to be changed on the fly. The reason this was so difficult, and I mentioned it in last week's devlog, is that I'm using Rewired for the controller stuff. You know, implementing controllers with it is fairly simple if you're doing basic things. I used it for the 7th chance a couple of years ago, and that was completely fine. While the documentation is comprehensive, a lot of the terminology is just confusing, and it just seems like it's not specifically worded in the best possible way. This is the rewired menu. I'm fairly sure I can show you this because it's all over their documentation. Here are the actions I have. You've got the default one, which is the third person, and then you've got the first person maps I've done. Can I modify these easily and directly? No. As you can see in the code here, I had to get the player reference. Super easy. Then I spent hours looking through functions trying to find a way to get that specific action. I could see a variable right here, controller ID, but when running it would always show 0. So I couldn't use that as a reference point to try to figure out how to get that specific action map to flick the little inversion toggle. Eventually, I found a workaround for this. This may not be the most appropriate way to be doing things, and the rewired community might just completely tear me apart for doing it. But what I'm doing now is, depending on which inversion type you're doing, third person or controller, it runs this specific function which enables only first person controller maps. Then it loops through, finds everything that relates to that specific string action here, and then I can change the inversion. And I just realized I've copy and pasted this code so many times for all the different inversion types, but I could just make it so that the function takes in a string. And then I could just have one function. I'll get on that. As I said before, this was such a big problem because I'm trying to do 2 different control schemes. If it was just one, I could just loop through, get the string, done, easy. But because I'm doing first and third person, and they both share the same function names for movement, because that's the way the engine's been built, it causes massive headaches. The very good thing though about controller integration and the scripts I've written for it is that it's done. I don't need to touch it for the rest of the project. I don't need to add any new inputs in. I don't need to change any more inversions. It's done. I can kind of just set it and forget it, which is good. The other thing is, while doing these controller integrations, it's really made me want to focus on learning the Unity new input system for my next project, because Rewired and me just don't seem to really mesh. Quality settings is the other thing that I integrated. So you can now change your resolution, you can change your graphics quality, and that's kind of where I stopped. I was going to go hardcore into changing things like shadow quality, texture quality, but I kind of just bundled it into a low, medium, high for the demo. In the future, for the full version of the game, I will make sure to have expanded graphics options, but right now it doesn't really matter. The game runs fairly well on most things. So you can see in the video, we've got high, which is on by default. We've got medium, and this is low. Not a crazy downgrade. The biggest one is in shadow qualities, but it still helps performance greatly. A few weird things I had to fix in these quality settings was Riley's lips. You can see here on low settings that it just kind of smooshes her face into one texture, and I kind of think it makes her look like a duck. But it's been fixed now. The issue there was just the texture resolution I'd put for Riley's face texture was far too low, so when it went to low quality and tried to downgrade it even further, it just mushed the absolute hell out of it. Also, as another tester pointed out, thank you DeadGuard, you're amazing, there was this in the bathroom scene. For some reason, she only showed up in low quality mode 100% of the time, and what was so weird is that this isn't even the monster's model. For a few minutes I thought my game was cursed and I was just getting random new monsters popping in for some reason, but no. It turns out ages ago, I was going to put in a different monster trigger in that area, back when the monster was kind of ghostly and just could appear and disappear rather than physically be in a space and walking around it using doors and things like that. Yeah, she shows up in low quality mode 100% of the time, but for me, I've only been editing and playing in high quality mode. So when I went into the bathroom, I couldn't see her at all. But if I moved a certain distance away, she would be there. If I got close, she was gone. And for a while, I was really confused by that. And that's why it took me so long to actually find her in the scene and just yank her out of that area. But overall, I'm glad this was caught, and this is why you need to test your games with a range of people that have different levels of hardware. If someone can only run it on low and finds this thing, A, it's terrifying, B, it's kind of immersion breaking, and C, it's an old model. Fun little quirks. So if you're testing, test with every quality level of your game. So in this devlog, I want to give you a really big tip, and that is things you do early on when developing your game are gonna whip around and bite you in the ass. And I found this out. As my game has expanded, I always had this script on called Switch Camera UI. Now what it did is whenever it detected a change between first person and third person, it would run this script and just do, as you can see on screen, a Boolean check, flip the variable. So if the UI is on, switch it off. If the UI is off, switch it back on. Makes sense, right? Well, as I found out once I integrated the save and load system, which hey, it was saving and loading. But when I fully tested this save load system by playing as both character types in each scene, switching to a different scene and reloading saves, 75% of the time it would turn off the UI for the wrong occasion and completely break the game. You could no longer pick up the camera again once you put it down. And that was all to do with this script that I wrote way back when I started this project. So that bit me in the ass and was an absolute pain. What I had to do was go back and just basically make 2 new functions, one to switch the UI on, one to switch the UI off, and then find every time I had referenced that in the game, which you probably understand is quite a lot, and change those off. So instead of calling the single function that would switch, calling an off or calling an on function. Just be very careful when you're designing things and just keep it in mind as your game's expanding that you may need to go back and change some of your work. Do it sooner rather than later. Doing this a lot earlier would have saved a lot of frustration because I had no idea what was causing this save load bug. If I'd integrated these 2 functions much earlier on rather than being like, hey, this is gonna work, this will do, would have saved a lot of headaches. And I just realized this kind of goes against what I said about the controller polling thing, where it works for now. But it's fine. So what's next? As I keep saying, the funding application is the most crucial thing that needs to be done, and I really needed this demo to be complete. So while I've been working on this demo, I have been gathering the data and information I need for this funding application. So fingers crossed by the end of next week, it's submitted and I can relax for a little bit. By relax a little bit, I mean not have these constant pressures. Still be working on the game, of course, and working to get the demo out to you, but not having the constant pressures of I need to hit this milestone, and if I don't get this done by this specific date, I could be in a lot of trouble. The submission I was hoping to get done by the end of this current week. So when this video is out, I was hoping to have the submission done. The problem is that I didn't see or expect controller implementation and all the graphics options to just give me such a headache. They took up so much more time than I expected and have definitely been the longest part of any slice of this project I've had to do so far. Hopefully one day I've got enough money I can hire someone to do that stuff for me and I can focus on what I like doing. Apart from the funding, there's still a few little issues to tidy up in the demo, such as controller options and graphics options not sticking if you exit the game and go back into it. But that's very, very minor. And the other thing that needs to be done is the credits screen. Before this goes in for funding and also especially for public, is that I need to credit everyone that has had a part in this game. I have been developing solo, but I've gotten testers in who deserve the recognition. And of course the person who's made the audio for the game. They need their recognition too because they've done fantastic work. That's about all for this week. If you've liked the deeper technical dive and also the fact I'm showing more rather than just having my face here talking, let me know down in the comments. If you could please like this video, it really helps small channels like mine. And if you could share with your friends, that's even better. But that's it for today. As always, stay indie.